What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to my content. And we're going to be doing a different topic this time other than the Will and Jada fiasco. So this is going to be about The Undertaker and some of his favorite storylines throughout his career. And mind you, I can think of a million storylines that are my absolute favorites from the 90s, in the early 2000s, in the late 2000s, up until like the 2020s. But yeah, let's get to the article. The dead man names several wrestlers he worked memorable angles with. Admitted over a career as long as his, you get a lot of good ones. This is what he had to say. Wow, obviously a lot of people think, Mick Foley, which is high up on the list. Obviously, Kane, probably the greatest story ever told in wrestling. I also enjoyed my rivalries with Shawn Michaels, Triple H, over the course of a 30-plus year career. You have a lot of interesting storylines with people that you get to compete against. To be honest with you, I think one of my favorite rivalries with The Undertaker was with him and Mankind. The work that he did started after WrestleMania 12, 96. Then his first ever match with him at In Your House, it definitely showcased a different side of Undertaker, being brutal and aggressive towards Mankind with the punches. And not to mention the famous Hell in a Cell match in 1998, which is very, very popular and underrated in my honest opinion. So let's continue. Ultimately, The Undertaker settled on his storyline with Kane being the greatest of his career. The two men worked together a lot throughout his time in the business. They were enemies and partners, and the sibling aspect is what The Undertaker believes fans clicked with. But I am going to say probably the battles with Kane. I think it was just, a storyline that people, whether you were a wrestling fan or you weren't, you understood just because of a sibling rivalries. And I think people identified with that being said. And Kane was always such a physically dominant athlete that he always brought the best out of me. So I am going to, I think he's basically saying that his storyline with Kane is probably one of his favorite works. And I think it's great because when Kane first debuted in the WWF 97 at the Bad Blood pay-per-view in October, it was one of those things where you either get scared or don't watch wrestling, period. Because when Kane showed up in the picture, it definitely showcased a different side of The Undertaker. It all started with the, Paul Bearer storyline. It was right after WrestleMania 13 when Paul Bearer threatened to reveal The Undertaker's darkest secret. And then up until SummerSlam when he lost the title to Bret Hart due to Shawn Michaels' unofficiated job. So it almost led up to the point where Paul Bearer revealed the secret to the world and led up to Kane showing up at the pay-per-view. And mind you, Kane's appearance in 97 was really frightening, but I just love that character, that frightening moment, and the scariest he's gotten while wearing the mask. He didn't roll his eyes back. The contacts in his eyes just made it look more scary enough. And you know what? It really goes to show you that the Brothers of Destruction is what made wrestling. The Brothers of Destruction is what made wrestling an interesting choice, because there was not a tag team from the late 90s and early 2000s that were more dominant than the Brothers of Destruction. And that's saying something. The Undertaker also spoke about the future of the business and the talent today he believes they're pushing. Undertaker also spoke about the future of the business and the talent today. He believes that they're pushing the envelope when it comes to what they can do inside the ring. And mind you, I did a video on that a while back, so go check it out. And like I said, I stand by what he said. He basically spoke the truth, and people refuse to acknowledge the truth about the product. They rather believe and what they're doing today is good, but it's not. So you're going to have to be more edgy and not be afraid to go a different route within the business. Because when it comes to AEW, they're not afraid to do anything. But the WWE, I feel like, are scared to do all of that because they're so invested in the, in with NBC and ABC or even Fox. But I think when it comes to Raw and SmackDown, they're just too afraid of being extreme, being more edgy. That's just the biggest problem I have with the company right now. And what The Undertaker said was facts. Let's continue. Athletes are athletes. But what separates whether you are a sport entertainer or you are a star is that the ability to connect with your audience. NXT is a great vehicle to get these guys jump started, he believes. But you're right. And continuing to push the envelope of what they can do athletically and physically. It is actually quite amazing because it's like a video game in real life. You know, I like what Undertaker said about this part as well. You know, if you look at NXT, you have a great amount of talents there that are way better over there. But the problem with that is that if you bring them to the main roster, they're going to end up being swallowed down, watered down, being a joke, and not being properly worked with. And it got to a point where they're going to end up, you know, being released from the company, you know, being requested for release. And it's sad that that's how it has to be every time they get called up to the main roster, you know. But I just feel like, you know, what Undertaker's saying was true. And whether people like it or not, think that you're a product of what you're doing with these terrible gimmicks and laughable jokes that are not funny and you're not even entertaining. But I would say that you need to hire new writers and try to be more creative with your product in the WWE or any other wrestling company. So with that, I say Undertaker is right on so many things. And shout out to Mark Holloway behind the character, by the way. I also need to bring up something else. Like I said, there's so many memorable moments from The Undertaker, but I would have to say one of my favorites was the early stages of the Ministry of Darkness, you know, in late 98 when he formed the group. But in early 1999, during the Ministry of Darkness days, before Shane McMahon created the corporate ministry, which is one of the worst things to ever happen in Undertaker's career. It just made him look weak, like a side put on the side. Basically, all of the hard work you put into your group and your craft, to have Shane McMahon just mess it up completely. And if you don't believe me, ask any wrestling fan. They'll tell you the exact same thing about his character throughout the Ministry of Darkness. That whole wedding segment with Stephanie McMahon was the prime example of how to make a storyline great while being dark and gritty at the same time. So, yeah. If y'all enjoyed this video, let me know. And if you want the article, I'll post it in the description as well. So, I'm out of here.